I've got a couple quick tips and tricks for you to get going with a little bit more R today. Nothing crazy, just quick couple things that I wanted to mention last time but did not. So let's go dive right into it. As always, I'm going to try to do a new file. So I'll do an R notebook file. And we're going to delete all of that. We're going to give it a heading and say this is a random number generator. So generate random numbers. This is our documentation. And we might as well put a new title on there saying random numbers because it's a notebook file. Remember, as soon as I save it, you can use it as an HTML file with code and all that. Let's insert a chunk, Control or Command Option I. That's our R chunk. And in fact, we'll name that chunk. We'll say random number underscore. And in the chunk, we're going to reintroduce the sequences. Remember, we did sequences 1 through 100. And if I hit Command Enter, you'll see them show up on the bottom of my screen. Let's say that I wanted to do another chunk down here. Let's do another heading, and I'll say random number 2. We're going to do Command Option I, random chunk, or another chunk. And we're going to call this one, or we're going to do 1 through 50 here, just for fun. There we go. Now, we have a lot of code, and we want to collapse some of this code. We can go up and see where that number 10 is, the line 10, that little down arrow right there. Click on that, and it makes all of the things under that disappear. Same thing with all of your Markdown. So your heading number 2, anything that's not heading number 2 going down, if you click on that 6, it goes away. And then click it again to bring it back. So that's how you can bring code and chunks and Markdown in and out of your actual viewer so that you can make your workflow process slightly better. There's a bird flying into my window right now, so I'm a little distracted. Anyways, we don't really need the second chunk right now. Let's delete it. I just wanted to show you those little arrows. So a random number, 1 through 100, that is not random. That is actually a sequence of numbers. So we don't want that. We want a random number. So in order to do a random number, there's a couple ways. There's one called run if. And if you do run if, you're going to put in a number of random numbers you want. That's the n. And then a min and a max. Or you can just leave min and max as the default, which is 0 and 1. So if I want 10 random numbers, I just hit Command Enter on that, and I get 10 random numbers with decimal places. If I wanted to make them between 10 and 40, same thing. And remember, you don't need to explicitly say min and max as long as the parameters are in order. I could have easily said min equals 10 and max equals 40 and run the chunk this way again, doesn't matter, and you get the same result. So you didn't have to explicitly say min equals, max equals, but you should get used to that because a lot of times the parameter order will matter. So it gets confusing. So if you're not worried about order, you can skip naming those parameters. If the order matters for sure, you have to name them. Okay. So let's run if, and we don't really want to do decimal numbers. Let's try a different one. Let's do another chunk below it, and let's do Command Option I, and let's try to get some decimal numbers. To do that, we're going to do a little trick. We're going to use that sample technique that we used before. Remember, sample is taking an arbitrary sample or random sample of numbers from a pool of numbers. So in order to do that, let's do a sample, and our arbitrary set of numbers is going to be, we'll do the same thing, 10 through 40, but remember the sequence, 10:40. That's a list of numbers will be sent back to this first parameter, 10, 11, 12, all the way up to 40. That's my n in this little yellow box here, the x. And the size, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to do, let's click on size and see what it says. A non-negative integer given the number of items to choose. So the order of these parameters are slightly different. I want to choose 10 numbers. And it's going to be from that sample pool. So let's Command Enter that. And we have 10 integer numbers. Pretty cool. And if I run it again, you run it again, and you get, let me run it using this, a set of different random numbers. Pretty easy. We can set those as variables. So let's call this one random2 and assign it to a sample of random numbers. And let's call this runIf one up here random1 and assign that as well. And I'll run that. So as you can see in my variables, in my environment, you see that I have rand1 and rand2. Cool. Well, let's say we don't want those anymore. How do we get rid of those random variables? Well, I already showed you once that this little brush here, this little broom, will erase all of these variables, but you might not want to erase all the variables. What if you just wanted to erase the number random2 or random1 specifically? Let me show you how to do that. I will do that in the console. So you can run the console at the same time as running your notebooks or your scripts by going down to the console here, and you literally can just type in, well, first of all, type in the word ls. I don't know what that stands for, I forget, but it's a Linux command and a R command. ls will give you the list, it'll return the list of the names of the variables in your environment. Pretty cool, so ls will give you that list, remember that. Let's say I want to remove a variable. We can do rm, open parentheses, and just type in. Let's say we want to remove random variable number 1. If I do that and I run it, as you see in the environment, it is gone. So now if I try to use rand1, it says object rand1 not found, but rand2 is still found. You can repeat it all you want. It's great. Or you can remove them all. Let's get rand1 back in gear. Let's press the play button here, and we have rand1 and rand2. We want to remove them all. Remember, ls open parenthesis close parenthesis did a random1 and random2. It gives you a list of the names of the variables. What I can do is I can do rm, so remove, and what do I want to remove? I want to remove the list of variables, so the entire thing. So I can remove the, I'm going to say list equals ls and open parenthesis close parenthesis, because ls will bring back a list, and you can remove them that way as well. So they're all gone, as you can see. That being said, a couple more things while we're here is something called a seed. I don't really use random numbers without being able to duplicate this. So you have to duplicate what you're doing. So in order to do that, we can set a seed, and you can say set.seed, and you give it a random number, the same number though. Like let's say I want to number it 345. If I set that seed, I'm still going to get random numbers. But every time I run this program, I'll get the same set of random numbers. It's going to be set based on the same algorithm, and I'll be able to reproduce this. This is very, very important, because if you're going to give this to a colleague or to a friend or to whoever, if you don't set the seed, then they truly will get a random number, and they can't duplicate what you've done to try to solve your problem, fix your error, or help you along, etc., etc. So with that being said, let's run this now with that seed set. As soon as I set that seed, you see my random numbers for rand1 is 16.5. Remember that number. I'm going to run this again, and I'm going to get the same number every time, 16.5. It's the same. Same thing with this one. Now I ran the seed, so I'm still living off of that seed. I hit this one for rand2, and I get 1838. Oh, it's a different chunk, so I have to set the seed separately. So if I go back to this one, I should get 16 every time. I didn't set the seed over here, so it's truly random. But if I set the seed, set.seed, and you just give it a number, and you just got to remember that number and offer it up if you want someone to duplicate it. So now we have 16, 12, 27, and if I click it again, same thing, same thing, same thing. You say, well, that's not random numbers every time. Well, it is random numbers. It's just random numbers based on that seed. So if I chose a different seed, let's say the number 1, those numbers, if you look at rand2 in the environments, those numbers change. But as I click it again and again, the numbers are still that same random number. And if I go back up, you still get 16.5. The whole point of the random seed is so you can duplicate the randomness. Now you want randomness because you want to have random outcomes for mostly statistics and for just anything really that you're programming that you need random numbers for. So you need those, but you also need to duplicate them. So that's where the set seed comes in. And you can set the seed multiple times within your actual chunk. So like I can use rand1 in chunk number 2 here. So if I do rand1 and I just hit Command Enter, it prints out random1. So the variables, this is called scope. The scope of that variable is good for this entire project. So all of these global environment variables are good for the scope of the project. I do find it weird that the set seed is not, but that's okay. Let me show you something else though. So set seed 1, I'm going to delete random1 here. If I hit the run button, let's see, we've got for random2, we have 1821. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to set the seed down here as something different. It's number 2. And then I'm going to run another random sample, 104010, and I'll run that one. and I have a different set of numbers, 16, 15, 29. So it's different. But if I go back to run this one, this is where you'll get confused. It's going to be a different set of numbers. So random 2 is 18, 21, 26. I'm going to run it again, and it's going to change because my seed, even though it's not in order, this is important too, it's not in order, but I ran set seed 2. So my seed has changed within this chunk. I hit the Command Enter button, and you'll see that my numbers have in fact changed, 38, 16. How do I get those numbers back? Well, I have to run set seed 1 again, then run ran 2 again, and I'm back to 18, 21, 26. So I hope that makes sense. Is you can run arbitrary lines of code, and because the results and the repercussions will be in your global environment, you could run into a lot of problem. And when you're troubleshooting, it's very important to kind of clear everything fresh and start all over again, especially with those random seeds. Hope that made sense. I might clear it up a little bit as we go, but I wanted to give you something to play with, and I'll see you in the next tutorial.